Imagine this, you're alone, it's late at night, and you hear a sound coming from the other room. You check it out, but there's nothing there. Or is there? In today's video, we dive into some of the creepiest, spine-chilling stories that will have you questioning what's real. So, turn off the lights, and let's get started. Number 1. The man in the vents. Lena had only been in her new apartment for a week when she started hearing scraping noises at night. At first, she thought it was just the old pipes, until she noticed something strange. Every morning, the vent cover in her bedroom was slightly open, just enough for someone to peek through. She convinced herself it was her imagination. Maybe the screws were loose, but the noises continued. Soft shuffling, breathing. One night, she decided to test a theory. Before bed, she sprinkled flour on the floor beneath the vent. The next morning, her stomach dropped. In the powder were handprints, not footprints, but handprints, leading from the vent to her bed and back. Panicked, she called the landlord. He dismissed it, saying, "That unit hasn't had access since the 90s. But when the maintenance crew pried the vent open, they found something worse than rats. Inside was a filthy mattress, rotting food, and dozens of Polaroids of Lena sleeping. Whoever had been living there hadn't left. Number 2. The wrong number. Jake was driving home late, the road nearly empty, when his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He let it go to voicemail, but immediately it rang again. Annoyed, he answered. A woman's voice whispered, "Turn around." A chill ran down his spine. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing but darkness behind him. "Who is this?" he asked, trying to shake the uneasy feeling creeping up his neck. The woman's voice trembled. "Please, turn around." Something about the way she said it made him slam the brakes. His breath caught as he looked in the mirror again. At first, there was nothing. But then, a pale face slowly emerged from the shadows in his back seat, mouth open in a silent scream. Jake whipped around in terror. The seat was empty. His hands shook as he grabbed his phone, ready to call the police. But when he checked his call log, there was no record of the call. Number 3. The unfinished game. Two brothers were clearing out their late grandfather's attic when they found an old, dusty board game tucked behind a bookshelf. The pieces were already set up, as if someone had been playing mid-game. The instructions were yellowed with age, but the message was clear. Finish what was started. Laughing, the younger brother rolled the dice. The board shifted on its own, moving the piece forward. A card slid out of a hidden compartment. The text read, "A player must pay the price." The younger brother smirked, until he suddenly gasped for air, clutching his throat. His face turned purple, his eyes wide with panic. The older brother grabbed him, shouting, "What's happening?" But there was nothing he could do. His brother convulsed, choking on something unseen, and then he was gone, vanished. The chair he was sitting in sat empty. The older brother stared at the board in horror. It had reset itself. A new card appeared. Next player's turn. The dice rolled on their own. Number 4. The woman at the window. Every night, Danny noticed a woman standing at the window of the house across the street. She never moved, never blinked. At first, he assumed she was a mannequin or some kind of Halloween decoration. But as days passed, she remained there, night after night, staring at nothing. One evening, just to amuse himself, he waved at her. She didn't react. The next morning, curiosity got the best of him. He asked his neighbor about her. The neighbor frowned and said, "That house has been empty for years." Danny laughed, assuming they were mistaken. But that night, as he glanced at the window, she had moved. She was still staring, but now she was staring directly at him. His stomach turned. Had she always been facing his house? Feeling unsettled, he closed his blinds and decided to ignore it. But just before going to bed, something compelled him to check one last time. He peeked through the blinds. She was gone. His breath caught in his throat. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I see you." His bedroom door creaked open. Number 5. The basement door. When Emma moved into a rental home, the landlord gave her a simple warning. "Don't open the basement door." She laughed it off, thinking it was just an old superstition or maybe there were foundation issues. But after a few weeks, she started hearing knocking from behind the door. It wasn't rhythmic. It wasn't random. It was impatient. One night, after a few drinks, she decided to put her fears to rest. Gripping a flashlight, she unlocked the door and peered inside. The air smelled stagnant, wrong, like something that had been shut away for years. She stepped forward, shining her light down the stairs. Then, from the darkness below, she heard it. Soft breathing. Her fingers tightened around the doorknob. And then, a voice whispered from the bottom of the stairs. "You let me out." Something bolted up the steps, faster than she could react. She slammed the door shut just in time, heart pounding. Silence. She backed away, trying to calm herself. But then, the knocking started again. This time, it was coming from the other side of her bedroom door. Number 6. The mirror's reflection. Megan had always loved antique shops, so when she came across a beautiful, ornate mirror, she couldn't resist buying it. It was the kind of mirror you'd find in a Victorian mansion, with intricate carvings on the edges. She placed it in her bedroom, next to her dresser, and admired it every day. But after a few nights, she began to notice something unsettling. The reflection in the mirror wasn't always the same as what was happening in the room. She'd be sitting on her bed, scrolling through her phone, but the reflection would show her standing in front of the mirror, staring into it. Confused, she tested it again. This time, she turned the lights off and sat in the darkness. In the reflection, she saw her figure still lit up, perfectly visible, as if the mirror was lighting her up from within. Terrified, she tried to remove the mirror, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if the glass had bonded to the wall. The reflection continued to change, and one night, as she was lying in bed, she noticed a dark shadow standing behind her in the mirror. She turned around, but there was nothing there. She looked back into the mirror. The shadow had moved closer. That night, she didn't sleep at all. Number 7. The silent caller. Rachel had just moved into her new apartment and was still adjusting to the strange sounds of the old building. Creaking floors, popping walls, and the occasional bang of pipes didn't seem too unusual. But then, her phone began ringing at odd hours. It was always the same number, private blocked. She ignored it at first, but the calls came more frequently. One night, she decided to answer it, hoping to finally find out who was calling. When she picked up, she heard nothing but heavy breathing on the other end. Rachel was about to hang up when she heard a voice whisper, "I'm coming for you." A cold shiver ran down her spine. She hung up immediately and blocked the number. But the calls didn't stop. The next night, she tried to leave her phone in another room. To her horror, she heard the phone ringing through the walls, as if it was following her. She tried changing her number. She moved her phone to another room. Yet still, every night, the calls continued. The voice was always closer. One evening, after hearing the voice again, she checked her phone. There was a new voicemail. When she played it, all she heard was a slow, deliberate whisper. "I'm already here." Number 8. The forgotten guest. At a family reunion, Sarah's grandmother told a chilling story about a relative who had disappeared mysteriously many years ago. Everyone laughed it off as a weird family tale, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, she decided to take a walk around the house. It was an old farmhouse, full of nooks and crannies, and she loved exploring. As she passed by the guest room, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. Curious, she pushed it open. To her shock, a figure was sitting in the room, staring at her. She froze. The person was an old woman, wearing a vintage dress. Her face was gaunt, pale, and completely expressionless. Sarah asked if she needed help, but the woman didn't reply. She stood in the doorway for a moment before walking away, thinking the woman must have been a guest who arrived late. But when Sarah mentioned the woman to her grandmother the next morning, she was met with a frozen silence. That woman was never supposed to be here. She died years ago, her grandmother said, her voice trembling. Sarah looked back toward the guest room, but the door was now locked. No one had been inside. Number 9. The door without a lock. Every house has its quirks, but Lily had never experienced anything quite like the door in her basement. It was a simple wooden door, locked and never opened. The only problem was there wasn't any key, and there was no handle. It was as if the door had been sealed shut. For weeks, Lily tried to ignore it, but her curiosity began to grow. There was no sign of any previous locks, but it was clear someone had gone to great lengths to seal it. One night, after a long day of work, she heard a strange sound, a soft, gentle thudding, coming from the basement. Against her better judgment, she grabbed a flashlight and made her way down the creaky stairs. When she reached the door, she noticed that the thudding was coming from the other side. Without thinking, she pushed against the door, and to her surprise it opened, despite not having a lock or handle. What lay on the other side was worse than she could have imagined. There was no room, just a narrow, black tunnel, twisting into the depths of the earth. The air was heavy with dust and something far more sinister. She turned to leave, but as she stepped back into the hallway, the door slammed shut, and a cold whisper followed her up the stairs. You shouldn't have opened it. Number 10. The child's drawing. On the first day of kindergarten, Ellie came home with a piece of paper clutched in her hand. It was a child's drawing, a messy sketch of a dark figure with hollow eyes, standing in front of a large house. At the bottom, Ellie had written, in a jagged script, "Don't go in the basement." Ellie's mother wasn't concerned at first. Kids drew strange things. But when Ellie repeated the warning every day for a week, her mother began to worry. Ellie would cry if she even mentioned the basement, shaking her head and saying, "I don't like the man down there." Finally, Ellie's mother decided to investigate. She went down to the basement, where the old furnace had broken down. But when she reached the bottom of the stairs, something made her stop. The air was thick with the smell of rot, and the floor was covered in old, muddy footprints. Suddenly, the house creaked behind her. She turned, expecting to see Ellie, but instead saw a tall, dark figure standing in the doorway. The figure smiled, its face pale and twisted. "I've been waiting for you," it whispered, its voice echoing across the basement walls. Before she could react, the lights flickered, and the figure was gone. But the smell still lingered. Number 11. The Watcher in the Window. It started as an innocent, late-night habit. Jane would walk home from her job at the diner and pass by the same row of houses every day. One night, she noticed something strange. At the last house on her street, a man was standing in the window, staring directly at her. At first, Jane thought it was a trick of the light or maybe a reflection. But the next night, it happened again, and the night after that. Every evening, when she passed, the same man would stand in the window, staring. His expression was blank, nothing more than a cold, unsettling stare. Feeling increasingly uneasy, Jane tried to walk a different route, hoping to avoid the house. But the next time she passed by, the man was still there, staring from the same spot in the window. On the 7th night, Jane decided to confront him. She stood across the street, trying to get a closer look. The man seemed to notice her, and his eyes widened. She took a step forward, and he slowly raised his hand, pointing directly at her. Terrified, Jane ran home. But when she checked the next day, the house was empty. The neighbors said the house had been abandoned for years. The man, no one knew who he was. Number 12. The Strange Visitor. Tom had always been a skeptic of supernatural events, until one rainy evening when he came home to a knock at the door. He opened it to find no one there, just a large brown envelope sitting on his doorstep. Curious, Tom picked it up and opened it. Inside was a small, handwritten note that simply said, "I know what you did." Tom was confused. He hadn't done anything that would warrant such a message. But then, his thoughts wandered back to a few weeks prior, when he had unintentionally spilled a drink on a stranger at a local bar. Could this be some kind of revenge? The next night, he received another envelope. This time, it had a picture of him in his own kitchen, taken from a window across the street. He had never seen anyone outside, but someone had clearly been watching him. As the days passed, Tom received more notes, each one increasingly personal, with details only someone who had been right next to him would know. Desperate to uncover the identity of the stalker, he decided to confront the person, going outside to search for any suspicious activity. But as he stood outside, he felt something cold on his neck. He turned around, only to find nothing but a single note lying on the ground beneath him, this time reading, "I'm right behind you." Number 13. The Basement Light. For months, Emily had noticed something strange about the basement light in her new home. Every time she went down to get something from the laundry room, the light would flicker, even though it worked perfectly fine during the day. It was never an issue, until one night when Emily was working late. The light flickered again, but this time, it didn't go out. It stayed on, illuminating the basement steps with an eerie, steady glow. Thinking it was just a short circuit, she went to turn off the light, but as she reached the bottom of the stairs, she noticed something in the corner of the room. There was a shadowy figure standing in the dark, motionless. Emily froze. She could hear breathing, slow and deep, but there was no one in sight. Suddenly, the light flickered once more, and the figure was gone. But Emily didn't feel relieved. Instead, she felt as if she was being watched. Days went by, and each time she went into the basement, the light would flicker again. One night, she couldn't resist the urge to check again. She crept downstairs quietly, and as the light flickered on, she heard the voice, a whisper coming from the dark corner. "I've been waiting for you." Emily ran upstairs and locked the door behind her, but the feeling of eyes on her never left. Number 14. The haunted photograph. Lily found the old photograph in the attic while cleaning out her deceased grandmother's belongings. It was a faded black and white image of a woman she didn't recognize, sitting in a garden surrounded by flowers and trees. Her expression was calm, but her eyes, they seemed to stare directly into Lily's soul. Lily felt an eerie pull to the photograph, almost as if the woman was calling to her. She decided to keep it, but soon after, strange things began happening. At night, she'd hear footsteps pacing around the house. Shadows would dart past her in the hallway, and sometimes she would feel a chill run down her spine, as if someone were standing too close. It all started after the photograph had arrived in the house. One night, she placed the picture on the mantelpiece, and when she woke up the next morning, the woman's face had changed. The smile was gone, and now, the woman's expression was one of anger. Terrified, Lily tried to burn the photograph, but as the flames touched the paper, the image remained intact. Then, the haunting escalated. One evening, Lily was sitting in the living room when she heard the voice, a faint whisper from behind her. "You shouldn't have taken me." She turned around, but the house was empty. Still, the photograph remained, its eyes never leaving her. Number 15. The stranger in the park. Ryan had always enjoyed his late-night walks through the park. It was a quiet escape from the stresses of work. But one evening, as he walked along the path, he noticed a man sitting on a bench, staring at him. The man was wearing a black hooded jacket, his face hidden in the shadows. Ryan tried to ignore him and kept walking, but something felt wrong. The next evening, Ryan returned to the park and saw the man again, sitting in the same spot, staring at him with an eerie, unsettling intensity. This time, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that the man was waiting for him. As he passed by, the man suddenly stood up and began walking alongside him, matching his pace. Ryan's heart raced as he sped up, but the man continued to follow. He turned down a side path to lose him, but the man was still there, standing at the entrance to the path, watching him with cold eyes. Ryan's instincts kicked in, and he ran out of the park as fast as he could. That night, he locked every door and checked every window. The next morning, he returned to the park, but the bench was empty, and the man was never seen again. Number 16. The reflection in the mirror. Sophie had always been fascinated by old antique mirrors, so when she found one at a yard sale, she couldn't resist buying it. It was an ornate, full-length mirror with a dark wooden frame. The seller mentioned it was from the 1800s, but Sophie didn't think much of it. She placed it in her bedroom and admired how it made the room feel bigger. At first, everything seemed fine, but soon, Sophie noticed something odd. Whenever she stood in front of the mirror, her reflection seemed a little off, like it was a fraction of a second behind her. It was subtle at first, almost unnoticeable. But as the days went on, the difference became more apparent. Sophie would wave her hand, and the reflection would follow, but just a second too late. The reflection seemed to have its own mind, its movements never quite matching hers. One night, Sophie stood in front of the mirror, staring at it. The reflection's eyes suddenly locked with hers, but it wasn't Sophie's face she saw. It was a stranger's face, pale, hollow eyes, and a sinister smile that stretched too wide. She tried to turn away, but her reflection didn't follow. It just stared. "Let me out," it whispered. Terrified, Sophie tried to smash the mirror, but no matter how hard she hit it, the glass wouldn't break. The stranger's face only grew closer. Number 17. The rattling chains. Ben moved into an old, creaky house on the edge of town. It was perfect for his budget and had a lot of character, though it was clearly aging. The first few days were fine, but then every night he started hearing strange noises. It was a rattling sound, almost like chains dragging across the floor. At first, Ben thought it was just the house settling, or perhaps the wind outside. But as the noise grew louder and more frequent, Ben grew uneasy. He would hear it around midnight, always coming from the attic. He tried to ignore it, but after a week, he couldn't take it anymore. He went up to the attic to investigate. When he opened the attic door, the rattling stopped abruptly. The attic was empty, save for a few old trunks and dusty furniture. But then, as he turned to leave, the noise started again, right behind him. He spun around, heart racing, but the attic was still silent. The chains had stopped, but the air was thick with tension. He stepped back towards the stairs, but just as he turned to leave, he saw a figure in the corner of the attic, a shadowy shape, standing perfectly still. Suddenly, the chains rattled again, and Ben bolted out of the attic. He never stayed in that house again. Number 18. The Vanishing Passenger. It was a quiet evening when Alan picked up a hitchhiker. He was driving through the countryside on a lonely stretch of road, and the man was just standing there, thumbing for a ride. Alan had never picked up a stranger before, but something about this one seemed different. The man seemed harmless enough, so Alan rolled down the window and invited him in. The hitchhiker got in, silently, and sat down. His face was pale, with unkempt hair, but he didn't speak for a long time. The silence in the car felt strange. Alan tried to make conversation, but the man only stared out the window. After several minutes, Alan glanced over at the man. He was still staring out of the window, but there was something off about him. His reflection in the rearview mirror didn't move. Alan's heart began to race as he quickly glanced back, but the man was gone, vanished. The seat next to him was now completely empty. In a panic, Alan slammed the brakes, but there was no sign of the hitchhiker anywhere on the road. He pulled over, checked the back seat, and found nothing. The entire incident had lasted no more than 5 minutes. After that, Alan couldn't help but wonder if he had just given a ride to someone who had never been alive. Number 19. The sound of footsteps. When Mark moved into his new apartment, it was everything he wanted: spacious, quiet, and in a perfect location. He settled in quickly, but one night, while trying to fall asleep, he heard a strange sound: footsteps. At first, he thought it was just the neighbors, but then the footsteps grew louder. It wasn't coming from above or below him. It was as though someone was walking inside his apartment. Mark checked every room, but nothing seemed out of place. He locked all the doors and windows, convinced it was just his mind playing tricks. But the next night, it happened again: loud, slow footsteps in the hallway. This time, he grabbed a flashlight and went through the apartment room by room. He checked the closets, under the bed, and behind the furniture, but there was no one there. The footsteps continued, though, as if someone was walking just behind him. Terrified, Mark finally decided to leave for the night, but when he returned the next day, everything was normal again. The footsteps never returned, but Mark never felt alone in that apartment again. Number 20. The cold breath. It was a crisp autumn evening when Sarah walked home through the woods. She was used to walking the same path every night, but this night felt different. The air was colder, and a strange feeling of dread hung over her. As she walked, she felt something brush against her cheek, a cold breath. She stopped in her tracks, her heart pounding in her chest. It was a quiet, calm night, and she was sure there was no one else around. But the chill in the air was unmistakable, and it felt as if something was following her. Sarah kept walking, trying to ignore the feeling, but the breath came again, this time closer, colder. She spun around, but there was nothing there. No one in sight. The hair on the back of her neck stood up, and the cold breath grew even more intense, as if something was right behind her. She broke into a sprint, running through the woods, but no matter how fast she ran, the breath stayed close, closer with each step. Finally, Sarah reached the edge of the woods and into the safety of the streetlights. The breath stopped, and the chill in the air disappeared. But Sarah didn't feel safe. She knew something had been following her, and it had never truly left. And that's it for today's creepy tales. But before you go, I want to know which of these stories chilled you to the bone. Or maybe you've got a terrifying tale of your own. Drop it in the comments below. Let's see who can tell the scariest story. And hey, if you enjoyed the video and want more spooky content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. That way, you'll never miss a creepy story, because who knows, next time, the horror might be just for you. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and remember, not everything that goes bump in the night is a shadow.